What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. A tremendous episode for you this week. We're just a few weeks away from the NFL draft, and we have one of the most intriguing draft prospects in this year's class on Next Pats with us today. It's Nakobe Dean, linebacker out of Georgia, Butkus Award winner as the best linebacker in the nation. He was a tremendous interview. You're going to hear about how the pre-draft process has gone for him, if he is still hearing rumblings about how his size is going to limit him, something he's heard for quite a while, and his reaction to those types of comments, how he sees his position going. What is the future of the linebacker spot, and where is it important for linebackers to excel, whether you're in the college game or the NFL game, because we've seen that college style is trickling up to the pro ranks. So you're really going to enjoy that conversation with Nakobe Dean. We're also going to hear from Todd McShay from ESPN, who did his conference call with reporters last week about the draft in general, but had some phenomenal insight on Nakobe Dean and what he thinks is one of the best fits for Nakobe Dean at the pro level. That's right. It's your New England Patriots. So first, let's actually roll that sound from McShay. We will react to that. We'll get into how the Patriots seem to be addressing their linebacker position this offseason, and then we'll get right to our conversation with Nakobe Dean. But first, here's ESPN's Todd McShay.
The one player I would kill to see in the Patriots, just because I love him and I know where he would excel the most, I think would be in New England with Bill, would be Nakobe Dean from Georgia. And every scout in the world has told me what he can't do, and his arm length isn't great. It's average. His speed, he hasn't run a 40 because apparently he's not a track guy. But find me a faster linebacker in terms of play speed in this class. And you're talking about like 9 guys that could get drafted on that defensive side for Georgia. He was the best player on it. You're talking about a player who, with 2 linebackers next to him, and Tyndall and Quay Walker, that are going to be drafted on day 2. He's 2 steps ahead almost every snap. You know, when the ball snaps, he's just getting there faster. So I don't care what his 40 is. Some guys just play like Jonathan Vilma's a great comp. I think Zach Thomas when I think of him. And I can tell you this, and I've heard this from Georgia. I've talked and met with him, and I've talked to multiple scouts that said the same thing, that we kind of all agree. There isn't a better player in this class in terms of football IQ than Nakobe Dean. And you match that IQ with what New England tries to do, and how they're so multiple and differentiate from week to week. That would be a lot of fun to watch.
So McShay is sold. Nakobe Dean would be a perfect Patriot. And it's hard to argue with him, right? When it comes to the football IQ factor in Dean's game, when you can see him diagnose a play as soon as the ball is snapped, get on his horse and run from one hash to the opposite sideline to make a tackle before the first down marker, you know you have a pretty special player on your hands, especially given the competition that Nakobe Dean is seeing in the SEC. This guy was a turnover creator. He was tied for Georgia's team lead in sacks. And by the way, in case you hadn't heard, that Georgia defense was absolutely loaded, one of the best all time in the history of college football. That is not an exaggeration. He's tied for the team lead in sacks, interceptions, tackles, and tackles for a loss. He was a stud, no matter how you want to break down his statistical production at the college level. But let's dive in even a little bit deeper to how Dean might fit with the Patriots. Because even though the football IQ is through the roof, we know the Patriots, their front office, Matt Groh, director of player personnel, Cam Williams, the director of college scouting now, those guys will look at more than just what Nakobe Dean can do in terms of the mental aspect of the game. They're going to look at athleticism. They're going to look at size. And size has really been a critical factor for the Patriots for a long, long time when it comes to what they have liked at linebacker. When you look at the guys that they have invested in most highly, whether it's Gerard Mayo, who was drafted in the 240s, ended up being around 250 pounds as a pro. Brandon Spikes, second-round linebacker, 250 plus pounds. Dante Hightower, 260 plus pounds. Those are the types of players that Bill Belichick has built his defense around because he expects his linebackers to be able to handle certain responsibilities from a physical standpoint. So again, you can add in names like Kyle Van Noy, Jawan Bentley, who's had a critical role for this team the last few years, who was a captain for this team. Bentley played at 260 plus pounds at Purdue. Kyle Van Noy, 250 pounds. Use him off the line, use him on the end of the line of scrimmage. Versatile, but enough size to be able to handle a variety of different responsibilities. So how does Dean stack up in that regard? We measured in at the combine at 5'11", 229 pounds. He didn't test at the combine. He did not test at his pro day. He's been dealing with a couple of different physical issues during the course of the pre-draft process. And so who knows if we will actually see him test, period, leading up to the draft. So there are some question marks in terms of what his athletic testing numbers would have been. And those are factors as well for all teams that are looking at these prospects and trying to project forward. Is Nakobe Dean too small to be a Patriots linebacker? That's the question that everyone's asking. We're going to hear Nakobe Dean talk about his size and how that might impact his role moving forward at the next level. But I'm here to tell you that the answer to that question right now is I don't think so. And here's why. My understanding is the Patriots are being more flexible in terms of how they evaluate that position and their size requirements at that position. You can look at the Mack Wilson trade as a pretty good indicator of that. Now, is that a groundbreaking deal? Is that a season-altering kind of deal? We'll see. But they trade away Chase Winovich in the last year of his contract for Mack Wilson in the last year of his contract. But Mack Wilson is an off-the-ball linebacker who I've been told is essentially a 3-4 linebacker and a 4-3 linebacker's body. What does that mean? Well, in a 3-4 style defense, which the Patriots play nowadays, oftentimes the Patriots will leave their linebackers uncovered by defensive linemen up front, meaning you have to take on a guard occasionally, one-on-one in the bubble, stack that player who might be 75 pounds heavier than you or more, shed him, and make a tackle. Mack Wilson loves contact. He loves trying to eat up blocks. He embraces that aspect of the game. He is a violent player with what I've been told is rare lower body explosiveness. However, Mack Wilson weighs 233 pounds, just 4 pounds more than Nakobe Dean. So the Patriots have shown a willingness to get smaller at that position. You can look at what the Patriots have done just over the course of the last couple of years and look at the second level of their defense. Oftentimes, you know this, not just linebackers back there. You've got safety Kyle Duggar or safety Adrian Phillips, or a few years ago, safety Patrick Chung. Good athletes, good tacklers, tough players who show a willingness to take on those guards and offensive linemen and maybe fullbacks in order to make a play, but they aren't physically built to do that on a consistent basis. And yet, Bill Belichick still has them there because he values that athleticism at the second level to be able to run and chase with running backs in the passing game, with tight ends in the passing game. And those players are tough enough to be able to still carry out what are essentially linebacker responsibilities. So that's number one. We've seen Bill Belichick use players that aren't necessarily 250 pounds at the second level. But number two is when you're talking about linebackers specifically, the Patriots have to adapt to what's been made available to them from the college ranks. It was all well and good for the Patriots to be looking for 250-pound linebackers and heavier in the past when there were more of those players coming to them from the college game. It's just not the case anymore. They don't build them like they used to at that position. And there are reasons for that. When you look at the college game now, the spread has become so prevalent. The passing game has become so prevalent. And the wider hashes in the college game force defenses to have fast players all over the field. Just for a quick breakdown, if you have the football on one hash in the college game to the boundary, so to the closer sideline, that space is condensed. It's a little bit more cramped on that side of the field. To the field, to the opposite boundary, you have all kinds of real estate that you have to cover against these pass-happy offenses. So what have colleges done? They've turned maybe high school safeties into linebackers. They've turned high school linebackers that might weigh 250 pounds or are at least on that track as they develop and as they get older to become defensive ends. And so the league can only do so much with what it is given. The Patriots can only do so much with what they're given from the college game. If there are fewer and fewer 250-pound linebackers, should they be overextending to make sure that they add those players to their defense? Or should they adapt? Should they mold themselves to what has been supplied to them, even if at one point in time their demand was for something different? So something Nick Caserio touched on when I spoke to him at the Combine for the Next Pats podcast. He highlighted Bill Belichick's ability to adapt. It's something that I think flies under the radar that not many people really give him credit for, even though he's been incredibly adaptable over the course of his career, not just year to year or decade to decade, but quarter to quarter, half to half, play to play. He's willing to change if it's going to make his football team better. And I think the supply of undersized linebackers has become such that the Patriots are having to adapt that position in their defense to be willing to take on those players a little bit more frequently, at least being open to those kinds of players. And that's why I think they would be open to taking on someone like Nakobe Dean. Is he going to be perfectly suited to take on a fullback? For instance, when the Patriots play the Raiders in 2022, they travel to Vegas. Jakob Johnson, former Patriot, is on that roster now. Will the Patriots be putting Nakobe Dean in the best possible position to succeed if on first down, their scheme asks Nakobe Dean to take on Jakob Johnson one-on-one, blow him up in the hole, and make a play on the running back? Maybe not. But because the passing game is so prevalent, because the passing downs, quote unquote, are greater in number in 2022 than they ever have been before, to have a player like Dean who can get sideline to sideline the way he can, a player like Dean who can diagnose the way that he can against some complicated passing schemes on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, in my opinion, would have incredible value. I also think what frees the Patriots up to potentially draft a player like Dean is the fact that Juwan Bentley is still on the roster. As we speak today, April 5th, Juwan Bentley is there to do some of that dirty work that Bill Belichick has wanted from his linebackers for years as the Mike linebacker. My belief is, and my understanding is, that the Patriots are, though they still want to be a physical defense at that level of the field, as long as they have one big body, they are willing to pair that big body with a lighter player who can run and chase. So that's a potential, in my opinion, that's a potential linebacker tandem for 2022 and beyond, whether it's Juwan Bentley or any other XL sized linebacker, and Nakobe Dean and Mack Wilson. And for instance, Cam McGrone, who the Patriots drafted last year in the 5th round, who is an explosive athlete in his own right, and who I know the Patriots have high hopes for moving forward. They believe there's real promise there. So by drafting Dean, potentially, you shore things up, in my opinion, at that second level. You don't have the same number of question marks that you might have for McGrone, who came off an injury last year, for Raekwon McMillan, who unfortunately tore his ACL right before the start of last season, even for Mack Wilson, who's coming into a new system, new environment, new team. He gives them some flexibility and some depth, but is he your long-term answer? He's headed into a contract year himself. So adding Nakobe Dean, I think, could take your linebacker room into the future, into the modern day NFL. And my understanding is right now that the Patriots are more willing to do that than maybe they have been in some time. That willingness could impact what the Patriots are willing to do schematically as well, right? With smaller linebackers who may not be as effective as blitzers as some of the Patriots linebackers of yore have been. Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy. Back in 2018, the Patriots blitzed their linebackers more than any team in football. 2019, similar story. Why? Well, because those players were big, they were strong, they could come downhill And because in obvious passing situations, the Patriots played so much man-to-man, they oftentimes had a free player to send as a blitzer from the second level. Well, again, are you putting your players in the best possible position to succeed if you're asking lighter linebackers to do the same kinds of things? Or should you play to their strengths and say, these players can be effective in coverage because of their athleticism, because of their movement skills, and so let's play them in coverage? I think the Patriots, we will see, are going to shift away from man coverage to the extent that they have played it over the course of the last several years, where they've been near the top of the league in man-to-man percentage, and we're going to see them play more zone. They'll still play man. Don't get me wrong. They will still play man defense. You have to play man-to-man in certain situations, many third downs, I would say, being one of those situations. But if they skew more towards being a zone defense, in part because they maybe don't have the high-end cornerback talent to be able to match up with opposing number ones on a regular basis, that could be a factor in terms of that shift. But the other factor is what is coming to them at the linebacker level. Again, if you're not getting that supply of 250-pound linebackers to send as blitzers, and you're instead using 230-pound linebackers, and you want to use those guys in coverage, in general, if you're asking your linebackers to do a lot of covering in space, you're going to be more of a zone-happy team. And so if that's the shift that the Patriots are making, if they're shifting towards this positionless football that it looks like they might be, where they could run out onto the field, Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips and Jabril Peppers and Jonathan Jones in the slot, who can cover a variety of positions. Throw Devin McCourty in there as well, who we know can be a versatile player. And then you add a player like Nakobe Dean on top of all of those guys. Now you have a variety of different options to cover a variety of different weapons on the other side of the ball. If you're looking at a team that has a dangerous back out of the backfield, as well as a big slot receiver, as well as a pass catching tight end, if you want to play zone and you want to combo your coverage to be able to handle all three of those different players who might be operating in a similar space on the field, but you're not exactly sure which player is going to match up with which assignment on the offensive side, to be able to have all of those types of athletes that can cover a variety of different positions and can sort things out, not only before the snap, but mid-snap, you'll be much better off. One of the areas in which the Patriots defense really struggled last season were passes to the flat, passes to the short to intermediate area of the field, oftentimes up the seams. Who's operating in those areas? It's running backs, it's slot receivers, it's tight ends. And I think the Patriots have done a fairly good job of being able to better handle those situations. But that's not to say that they're going to be perfect on that front with the additions they've made. And I would point to Peppers in particular. He gives you more flexibility. If you are going to be more of a zone team, he's probably better in zone than he is in man, is what I've been told at this stage of his career. But someone who can cover backs, who can cover tight ends, who might be able to cover a slot receiver if he has to exchange with Jonathan Jones. And now you have another good, aggressive, physical, smart tackler in that portion of the field to go with Duggar, to go with Phillips, to go with Jones. Maybe Mack Wilson factors into that equation. Maybe Nakobe Dean factors into that equation as well. If they can shore up what happened in the passing game in the short to intermediate range last year, if you can get those players who can run and cover and tackle and get pass catchers on the ground, especially in the league now where how much of NFL offense is based around getting the ball to your playmakers in space and watching them run. The Patriots are going to see an offense that is completely almost built around that idea when they play the Miami Dolphins. And Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and that RPO game with Tua Tagovailoa that I'm sure they will not fully get away from, even with Mike McDaniel there as the head coach, who's going to bring in some San Francisco concepts. But the San Francisco concepts are similar in some ways, whether you're running RPOs or not. San Francisco wants to get the ball to its best playmaker, Deebo Samuel, in space and let him go to work. Get it to George Kittle in space, let him break tackles and make yards after the catch. This is what the NFL is turning into. And if you don't have players that can cover that short to intermediate area, that aren't good athletes, that aren't good tacklers, then you're in trouble. That to me is why Nakobe Dean should have immense value in today's NFL, is because that's the kind of player he is. Let's hear from Nakobe Dean himself about his path to the draft, about his relationship with the Patriots and who he has spoken to from one Patriot place over the course of the last few weeks, and how he sees himself fitting in at the next level. Here's Nakobe Dean. All right, very excited now to have with us Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean, Horn Lake, Mississippi's own. Nakobe, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank y'all for having me.
You have to be a very busy man this time of year, because even though we're through the combine, we're through the pro days for most schools, we are officially in interview season right now, and players are taking trips. I'm sure there's plenty that's being done virtually. Just how loaded up is your schedule right now?
It's definitely, talking with all types of teams and just, just meeting with people and having all type of little media interviews and everything also. But also on top of that, you got to get your work in. You got to work out, keep your body right, get ready for the season.
Well, and I know from hearing some interviews that you've done in the past, you love talking ball, right? So that's your thing. You want to talk ball, and I'm sure you've got the opportunity to talk a lot of ball now with these teams. And I'm curious, Nakobe, when you are meeting with clubs, how do they envision your role? How do they see your game translating from everything you did at Georgia, Butkus Award winner, to their schemes at the next level?
Everybody thoughts and roles on me kind of flip. They kind of change depending on the team. From team to team. Some people see me as a middle Mike. Some people see me as a weak side backer. But it don't matter. I feel like you plug me in, I feel like I can learn the position. I can play it to the best of my ability.
All right. Well, Nakobe Dean, if you put your general manager hat on, your head coach hat on, where would you play Nakobe Dean in the NFL?
I put him right in the middle of that defense, green dot. Definitely the one making all the calls.
Green dot, the signal caller. I know that's something you did in high school. I know you obviously did it at Georgia as well. How much pride do you take in your ability to not only communicate the plays, Nakobe, but it seems like there's a lot of additional communication that had to go on during your career at Georgia when you are the leader of that defense to make sure everything was on the up and up, that everybody was on their P's and Q's. How much pride do you take in that? And how long did it take for you to maybe develop into sort of that leadership voice for the Bulldogs?
Right. I take a lot of pride in it. I feel like Coach Shootman, which was my linebacker coach at Georgia, he kind of instilled that in us that we was the heartbeat of the not only the defense but the team, and we was basically the quarterbacks of the defense. So it was on us to get the guys going. It was on us to basically demand greatness and hold everybody to the standard. So I take a lot of pride in that, and I feel like it took me after my freshman year. I kind of got a hang of that, and I was able to start stepping into that leadership role.
Well, and if you're in the middle of that defense, that is sort of the de facto leadership role right on that side of the ball. We talk about that all the time at the quarterback spot. But when you're calling the plays for that defense and you're the quarterback on that side of things, you have to be a leader. Was there any growing pains that you experienced on your way to being recognized in that way, Nakobe? Because clearly a lot of great players at Georgia, a lot of upperclassmen that were great players at Georgia before, you had really probably fully come into your own as a collegian. So what was the toughest part of maybe developing into that kind of player?
For me personally, it was kind of trying to be what they wanted. I feel like I came in, they kind of looked at me as a quiet guy, didn't talk much. I feel like, I can talk if need be. I can express myself. So they kind of emphasized making me make the play calls. They say I wasn't loud enough, and I felt like I was being loud. But looking back on it, they were just basically trying to prep me to be that leader. And I feel like they was hard on me with that. Even when I felt like I was doing the utmost, it was always, you can do more. You can do this. You can, if the DB behind you bust, why didn't you tell him what coverage y'all were playing if you knew? And he probably didn't know. So it's like when it came to little things like that, you started taking other people's. You started being. I feel like I was responsible for for the whole defense, right? So I feel like they on my side of the defense. If the D line is in the wrong, if they like tight right, they're supposed to be tight left. It's our job to make that call. It's our job to get them right. So when I started taking ownership like that upon the defense, I felt like that that helped me all in all as a player.
You've got to be almost a human spackle to a degree, right? Making sure every crack is fixed and everything is ready to go before a given snap. We saw that on your tape time and time again as we watch you through your college career. Nakobe, when you are in the middle of that defense, a lot of trash in there going on, especially first and second down. You've got offensive linemen coming at you. When you look at that part of the game and you look at the leap that you're about to make to the next level, a lot of people focus on your size, and we could talk about that. But how does your size translate to the pro game, in your opinion, and being able to adjust with everything that offensive lineman will throw at you as a pro?
Right. So I'm just like I always do. You know, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna assess it. I'm gonna work it. You know, I'm gonna work at it. You know, my size is something that been questioned my whole life since coming out of high school. My high school coach called me the other day, and he was talking about it. How rivals didn't want to give me a fifth start because they thought I'd be too small to be an effective player in college, basically, be a effective linebacker. So you know, it's just little things like that. But just you know, I'm gonna continue to work on my craft and do what I got to do. And I know what I want to do. I know my goals, and I don't feel like my size is gonna get in the way of me not completing my goals.
What's your reaction when you do hear people continue to focus on it? You know, you said it's something you've heard for a long time. So
Yeah,
how do you react now when you do
yeah.
hear those things?
I don't care. I mean, it's like a chuckle. You know, it's like a chuckle, and it's like a okay. People always it's been something. It's always been something. So it's nothing that bothers me or gets at me. You know, it does nothing but makes the chip on my shoulder bigger. You know, the chip that I got from just coming from Horn Lake and coming from Mississippi and just coming from where I come from and all the things I went to, it does nothing but makes it bigger. And this whole process has done nothing but grew that chip on my shoulder.
Do you feel like you have been looked at in that light through this process? Do you feel like you've been dinged because of your size through this pre-draft process? Have you heard things from teams or from media or from anyone
Yeah.
else that would lead you to believe, hey, people still focused on the wrong things here?
I mean, me personally, I don't listen to I definitely don't get into the media. You know, you got people out there saying that you the worst thing ever, and you got some people saying you the greatest thing ever. So you try to keep that neutral and not try to listen to too much of that at all. But you know, you got teams who ask me about it, who basically ask what you just asked, how I think I would be able to work with it, basically, and the answer continue to be the same. I work.
Well, when it comes to your fit and your style of play in the NFL, Nakobe, I think a lot of people do look at you and say, that's the future of the linebacker position. You don't necessarily have to be a 255-pound behemoth that's going to take on offensive tackles one-on-one, but you need to be able to run. You need to be able to cover. So do you view yourself that way? Are you the future of the linebacker position at the professional level?
Well, I'm coming into the NFL, so I feel like you saying for you to say that I'm the future, I say of course, you know, I'm the future. But we also got one of my teammates, Quay Walker, coming in. He was 6'3", 240, 245. So it's like I'm not saying that this model of linebacker is the best model. I feel like if you can play, you can play. No matter how your body shape, how tall you is, how big you is. If you can play ball, you can play ball. If you can ball out, you can ball out. And that's my whole thing, you know. Uh, if I looking back on my college career, if I did good, I wasn't gonna say yeah, it was because I was 6'2", 230, and I can run crazy. If I did bad, I wouldn't be like it's because I'm 5'11", 230. It wouldn't have been it would nothing would have been would have basically went back into my size. It's all about how you work and how you perform on the field. It's a what have you done for me lately type of league, and you make plays they can't deny.
I know you love to study ball. I know you work really diligently at your craft. Do you feel like, Nakobe, that the college game is in a way trickling up to the pro game, meaning the pass game has become so important at the NFL level, just as it has been at the college level, that you need to be, even at the linebacker position, you need to be special when it comes to throwing downs and in throwing situations in order to thrive? Do you see the game going that way, even as you're making this transition yourself?
Definitely. You see the game becoming more spread out, and people being able to do more things. You need more people who can cover as well as stop the run and things like that. But at the same time, I feel like the league and from me watching the film in the league, they do a good job of balancing that. They still getting 12 personnel. Still see some teams with fullbacks and things like that. We're using their tight ends as fullbacks to run the ball and stack the box. So you still got to be able to do that as well as cover fast running backs or receivers or tight ends out the backfield.
Well, the Patriots offense has been one of those teams over the last few years that have really deployed the fullback liberally. They have two tight ends that are going to be a big part of their offense, it looks like, moving forward here in 2022. Nakobe, I'm curious your perception of the Patriots organization. We know Bill Belichick and Kirby Smart have had a relationship that's gone back a long way. A bunch of Georgia Bulldogs in that Patriots locker room over the last few years. Right now, you've got a couple on the offensive line alone with Isaiah Wynn and with David Andrews. How much contact have you had with the Patriots this offseason, Nakobe? And what do you know about Bill Belichick as a coach that would make you think that you would be a really strong fit here in New England?
So for one, let me say growing up, my mother's team was the Patriots. My mom was a big Belichick fan, but I've had meetings with the Patriots. I feel like I definitely enjoyed talking ball with them because it was nothing I could so to speak. I mean, everything that we did, they knew. It was kind of from under the same tree. I remember talking to the coach, and he was like, "What's this check when y'all go to empty?" I'm like, "Is this check? We checked this." And he was like, "Yeah, where you think that came from?" And I'm like, I don't know." He was like, "Yeah, we made it up." And I'm like, "Oh." So it's like just they kind of run the same system as far as defense, and I think Coach Smart actually busted in our meeting when we was meeting with them, and he basically they looked like they had been friends for a long time. You can tell that they was very acquainted with each other, but they seem to have the same philosophy when it comes to playing defense and come to playing football. So that's great.
Well, and I know you've talked about in the past, hey, Georgia, they play 4-3, they play 3-4, they play 4-2-5. It's whatever you need depending on the situation for the Bulldogs. And with the Patriots, it's been the same way under Bill Belichick for a long, long time. So when you've met with them, Nakobe, has it been with Bill Belichick or has it maybe been with Gerard Mayo, who's the inside linebackers coach in New England?
The meeting I had was with first we met at the combine, but it was just like they wasn't in there basically. But then we met when they came to my school for the around pro day. It was I haven't met with Gerard Mayo, but it was Coach Belichick and it was Coach Patricia.
Two pretty important guys to the Patriots defense over the last decade or so, with Matt Patricia running things on that side of the ball for a long time. And you bring up a great point about your background and how that would mesh with what the Patriots do defensively. I'm also curious. I wanted to ask you this, Nakobe. You mentioned your mom, Nikita, and I've heard her and I've read about her calling you a math whiz. And that back in the day, you'd enter a math competition she didn't even know about. You end up winning the thing. I know you were a mechanical engineer major at Georgia. So your brain certainly works in ways that I can tell you right now, mine does not, but it might help you in terms of how you digest a playbook, I would think. Can you explain to us maybe how that part of your skill set, what you've got going on upstairs, will help you sort of enmesh yourself in whatever NFL system you end up in?
So, for me, it was, as far as education-wise, it was always, I took my education just as serious as I took my sports. Growing up, my mother, it was always education. It was never like sports. Sports was just something I did. It was a hobby growing up until I got to like high school and I finally, got serious with it. But as far as everything in the classroom translating to everything on the field, I feel like the study habits and retaining information, it helps me because it's just like me trying to study to learn certain equations and everything, or how to do a certain problem. All these things, it's just like trying to learn a playbook, trying to learn cover six where the safety come down. If it's three people over there, if it's 3-by-1 set, the safety coming down, we could coming down strong depending on the defense, depending on the call they call. So just things like that kind of all help me basically put it. It's like a puzzle piece kind of. You kind of put it together, and it definitely helps me out a lot.
Well, Nakobe Dean, I'm sure a lot of teams, as they're putting their teams together, are hoping that you can be one of those puzzle pieces for their roster. Mm-hmm. Tell us before you go, what's the one thing that you hope to bring to an NFL club as a rookie in 2022?
Oh yeah, I hope to bring that with the winning mentality. You know, I feel like my mindset is second to none, is unmatched, and not just on the field, but in life. You know, I feel like to bring that winning mentality and that leadership to whatever team I come. You know, and that energy and that passion that I play with.
Well, Nakobe Dean, it's great to talk to you about your path, what the pre-draft process has been like, and really looking forward to seeing wherever you end up landing at the end of this month, how your professional career goes from here. If you come to Foxborough, Nakobe, promise us you'll come back, you'll join the podcast, and we'll talk a little bit more ball, okay?
Definitely.
All right, great stuff there from Nakobe Dean, having the opportunity to meet with Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia and talk ball with those guys and see that relationship between Bill Belichick and Kirby Smart, which we know goes back a ways, maybe not quite as far back as his relationship with Nick Saban, of course, Bill Belichick's best friend in coaching, arguably. But the relationship there, to me, is an important one for us to point out because the defenses do have some similarities. They are, in some ways, amorphous. They are, in some ways, both game plan specific. And the jobs and the calls and the checks you heard about from Nakobe Dean there as he's going through his interview with the Patriots and his meeting with the Patriots. You know where that check came from? The one that you're using in your defense at Georgia? That was our thing. That's great insight that Nakobe Dean was able to share with us there. And so to have two of the heaviest hitters in the Patriots building, arguably no two more important people right now in the building when it comes to what the Patriots want and need in this year's draft than Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia, his right-hand man these last couple of years, to understand that those are the guys that have been in there meeting and talking with Nakobe Dean. That is fascinating to me. And we know just how highly they would value, to get back to Todd McShay's points on Nakobe Dean from earlier in the podcast, how much they would value the football IQ portion of what Nakobe Dean will bring to whatever team it is that he ends up with next. You heard him talk about his mechanical engineering background and how the way he thinks helps him process football thoughts and football concepts on the field and off. You also heard about the chip that he has on his shoulder. I don't know, you could go through just about every great player in the history of the Patriots organization, and I would say that chip, however you want to describe it, that motivation that Nakobe Dean gets from being called small, from going through some of the things he went through in his background. That's the kind of thing that I think would interest the Patriots as well, to have some real life motivation to be able to not only achieve a player's own personal goals at the NFL level, but to be able to enter into a program that is difficult, that is demanding, that requires a lot of work, a lot of focus, a lot of conditioning relative to some other clubs across the NFL. These are things that we've just heard from players that have spent time in other places. That chip is important, and that chip is clearly there for Nakobe Dean. So great player in the SEC, great player on one of the best defenses in the history of college football, and a player that, even though he's smaller than what they are used to using at the second level, I think would have plenty of interest in New England. Nakobe Dean, really happy to have him on the show this week. Really happy that you guys were able to listen and take it in. We'll be right back at you next week with another episode of Next Pats. We're getting there. We're getting close. The draft is approaching. It's the best time of year. Hopefully you feel the same way. We'll talk to you very soon.